What is going on in England? Nice question. On the newspapers, there's a lot of talk about. The GBP has lost to 17.45%. Treasuries are going deep down, not only because of the rise of interest rates that we've already talked about in other videos, but for specific reasons related to what is happening in England. We can see it from this recent fall that started in early September. There are rows in gold shops to acquire coins, ingots, whatever is capable to preserve our capital value in a double-digit inflation context. So the scenario is not particularly happy in England, but which are the reasons and which implication does this English crisis have in terms of economic politics of the new government and most of all of systemic risks in the global economic financial system? Because what is going on in England may have a contagious effect in the rest of the world. We'll talk about this and much more in this video. England, as well as most developed countries, is not free from the inflation problem, which has already reached double digit in July and has slightly stepped back in 9.9 in summer. But we'll see in the next data that it is not going to reach 2% rapidly. The British, as us Italians and the rest of the Europe, and also Americans, must live with enormous inflation rates. For their part, British have implemented an interest rate increase policy which started slightly early, in the end of 2022, and we can see fast increases of the interest rate until the current 2.5%. Monetary policy is slightly anticipatory compared with America and USA, but it follows the same trajectory. So England also experienced the fall in prices for treasuries. It's the first dotted line that we use to identify the price reduction trend for 10 years of treasuries. This is gilt, the Italian BTP, the German Bund, the American Treasure. The gilt is the English Treasury. This is 10 years long. It also seen a contraction because of the increase of the interest rate in the first half of the year. But this fall is a complete English-specific risk that we'll talk about in this video. We'll talk about it as usual with many slides. A lot of slides. Beneath this video, there's a lot of research that our team had to do to make a comprehensible content and also make it financially unattackable, with proof and data supporting it, not that fluff that's commonly seen on YouTube. So if you like this content, I suggest you to subscribe, click on the bell, and you should know that these slides can be downloaded for free, and I'll explain how at the end of the video. England also has to live with high costs for energy, and there are protests and petitions to ask the government actions to contain the cost of living. The cost of living crisis, as you can see. The average cost of heating in the UK in 2018 was £553. In September 2022, the estimated cost should be potentially higher than £2,500 annually. The 453 were also annual. The English government already intervened with what is it called mini-budget. But wait a minute, which government are we talking about? Because Boris Johnson recently resigned, and the Prime Minister is now Liz Truss, along with the Prime Minister of Finance Kwasi Kwarteng, I hope I said it right, which found herself in various controversies because of the economic policies that she's implementing. The newborn government of Liz Truss takes the energetic situation by the horns and decides to cap the bills at £2,500 annually. And this cap, this limitation to the bills, will be active until the end of 2024. This huge support scheme will have a cost of about £150 billion, or better, could cost that amount. The true amount will be discovered in 2024. Liz Truss says these are extraordinary measures to use in extraordinary situations, like the one we're seeing right now. The mini-budget also implements a great tax cut. In fact, government will cancel a planned rise in corporation tax, because an imminent corporation tax rate up to 25% was expected, and will lower the income tax, the personal income taxation. In a context in which the Bank of England said that the UK was likely to enter a state of recession. How is this fiscal stimulus and this help to families financed? Talking about the bills problem. Debt. This is a very important topic because we started with government policies and we'll arrive to treasuries and what's happening to them, and we'll see that this will have an impact on retirement funds. But we'll get to it shortly because I told you this is a very juicy video, but we must understand the sequence of events. The meaning is that this is a hyper-expensive debt policy in a context in which inflation is close to 10% and England is entering recession. The screen can give us an overall view of what's going on. Double-digit inflation, already talked about it. Treasuries in strong contraction as prices, so yields reaching the skies. The skies, relatively, compared to 2021, 2019, 2020 is reaching the skies. They were close to zero, now they're beyond 4%, so it's relatively high. A tax cut never seen before, just once in the history of England, which cuts the 1.5% of the English gross domestic product. A great tax cut, but we can see it comes with various implications. What we thought could be the cause of the problem maybe is the consequence instead, the impact that these fiscal and monetary policies have on the exchange rate, that is going down vertically. The GBP is losing value week after week, actually day after day. The thing is, if we want to contain inflation, we've already seen that in other economies, Europe and USA, we must increase interest rates. We must cool down the economy, so that if the request is contracting, the spike of prices will contract as well. Unless, and this is a premise that must be done, there's a price increase for energetic reasons, Russia-Ukraine conflict, speculations on energy price, and so on. But all the other components of inflation, because energy is responsible of about 30% of inflation, while the rest of inflation can be reduced contracting the request, like increasing the cost of money, and so cooling down the economy. So for one side, the Bank of England would increase interest rates, cooling down economy. On the other side, what the government is doing is stimulating the economy. How? By cutting taxes. But if on debt, then it should emit a new public debt to finance this policy. So on one side, the Bank of England would reduce monetary mass. And how? By selling English treasuries. Because think about what it did on the contrary when there was quantitative easing. They bought treasuries and so reduced the return rate. Okay? Now they're doing the opposite. They want to reduce monetary mass and so they sell treasuries. On the other hand, the English government is also selling treasuries. So, what is going on? Well, maybe there are too many treasuries being sold, potentially missing buyers. And what happens in a market in which there's a lot of supply but little request? We know that prices drop, but they drop vertically. So basically the market is filled with treasuries. This meme shows exactly what is going on in England. Basically, the fiscal and monetary policy is in a loop, a dead end, we could say. So if treasuries are placed in the market to reduce monetary mass from the Bank of England and to finance a new debt from the Ministry of Economics, prices drop. And what happens to the return? It rises. And we've seen it, already at 4.5% of return. But wait, not for a 10 years yield, but for a 2 years yield. But this repricing, especially this one, the graphic that has a long scale starting from 2008, doesn't show how vertical this repricing is, how fast was the transition between 3 and 4.5% of expected return. Why? Because the downward repricing of the treasuries was very fast. And we can see it in this huge negative section, which represents the daily change in a 30-year yield. So the whole bond curve is repricing, considering the monetary policies and the economic policies of the government. So these 30 years that had a long duration were massacred. How much was it massacred is seen in this tweet. A bond due to 2061, so emitted probably in 2021, so 30 years, with a return rate of 0.5%, a block of treasuries sold for a counter value of $970 million, now is worth $240 million. And these treasuries are in someone's wallet, so someone has a loss on a 30-year yield treasury, after 1 year from buying, of about at first glance the 70–75%. But now we're looking at the consequences of this, because we've seen there's a short circuit, as seen from that great meme. Which is the short circuit? The short circuit comes from the fact that there was no liquidity on treasuries. There was too much selling offer, but no buyers, or little institutions or investors that wanted to buy. Situation was so bad, is so bad still, that the Financial Times reads, "The Bank of England had to intervene." We'll see how, because there was a proper shit show. Precisely because of the fact that the tax cuts proposed by the government are unfunded, basically undipped. It is not covered by a reserve from the government, all deficit. To avoid or at least limit this shit show, the Bank of England had to intervene. Doing what? Well, again, buy English treasuries. And this is incredible news, really incredible, in a context in which they were implementing quantitative tightening policies of monetary mass reduction. The Bank of England, to avoid a financial collapse, that is what we're talking about, had to intervene by becoming a last resort buyer of English treasuries. Basically, no one buys English treasuries, then I'll buy them, Bank of England. But they're in contrast with, first, what they're doing in the rest of the world. But we could also say, who cares? But two, what I was doing before, that is monetary mass reduction. So the Bank of England, with this news release, announces the fact that the repricing of treasuries, in particular long-dated ones, was so important that basically forced them to intervene because there was a risk to the UK financial stability. But hear me out, they already said it loud and clear, they won't be buying infinitely, because 3 weeks ago they were selling treasuries. So they said that they will intervene for a limited time, until the financial stability threat of England will be solved. Theoretically, their strategy of reducing by 80 billions the monetary mass per month is still unaffected and unchanged, so it does not predict any change. Theoretically, if this whole emergency is solved, so they confirm this should be a short-term operation, an English Treasury support operation with their purchase, that is currency emission in the market that should last for a short time. But what does it mean that there was a systemic risk in England? What does it mean to intervene to grant financial stability of England in this case? Well, this is a very important topic, and it's the reason we made this video. I want you to understand the logical sequence, because you'll notice that this topic is also relevant here in Italy. Most of all will give explanations to concepts, in my opinion, not fully noticed by everyone, saying that Italy's problem is just the absence of euro. They should just print money and every problem is solved. This is a great example of what can happen by randomly printing money. The Bank of England launches a £65 billion move to calm markets. Why? Because it could jeopardize pension funds. Careful, this is an important topic because it's the money we'll rely on when we will retire. And if there's a problem with pension funds, the whole financial stability of a country depends on it, right? So now we understand why pension funds are at risk. The cause-effect sequence will be perfectly clear to you. That brought many pension funds to be put at extreme risks in the last weeks. The problem, read on the Financial Times, is that pension funds, in the context of dynamics we've seen before, were at risk of insolvency because of the mass sell-off, the compulsive selling of English treasuries, which led to further downside the treasury price after the recent price contraction that happened because of the interest rate increase. Pension funds were forced to further liquidate treasuries, and we'll notice how shortly, so further contributing to lower liquidity of treasuries, just because there were other treasury sellers, also pension funds. At some point, says an English banker, I was worried this was the beginning of the end. The thing we risked last week was another Lehman Brothers, or at least we got very close. It was not quite a Lehman moment, but it got close. Many market players, many financial institutions ran out of collateral and dumped gilts. They had to dump English treasuries on the market. What does it mean they ran out of collateral? What's the problem of a pension fund if treasuries drop down in price this way? I'll tell you right now. First, we must know that in England, there are two types of pension funds. These are defined benefit and defined contribution. What's the difference? Well, the benefit is the income, what we earn, our profit. So we could call it default income, we could say it like this, and the alternative is defined contribution, so a defined funding. They look like the same thing, but they're very different, because a defined benefit pension fund, a fund with fixated amount that the saver will receive at maturity, assumes that there is a future fixated income that the saver will receive. Even in a context in which rates dropped drastically in the last years, we talked about it in various videos, and expected rates for bonds until 2021 were very low. We were talking about 0%. So how could a pension fund by granted coupon, we could say, grant future returns in 20-30 years in a very low rates context? Well, very simply, we take the fund asset, split it in a pair of shares, we say two now, but it's difficult to understand percentages. I didn't focus on them, but we could get the logic. One low-risk share, treasuries for example, and a higher-risk share. What's the purpose of this splitting? Make the higher-risk share with high-risk bonds, maybe high-yield treasuries, generate that return the treasury doesn't generate. So making the union of the two parts give a return in line with the promised contribution in the future to the investor. Which are the risks? Well, the higher risk part can have market risks. Perhaps the bond yield is exposed to credit risk, rates risk, and so on. The safe part instead has one single threat, that is interest rate risk. Careful, this is a technical part, but I can assure you you'll get it. But if you don't get most of this, you can understand the logic. First of all, remember you can download the slides, I explained how at the end of the video. But if you're finding value in this, click like, because this content required a long time to analyze the situation, write it down clearly and comprehensively, and at the end make this video. Okay, so how do we protect ourselves against interest rate increase? With derivatives. Very easy. I'm not going to explain what it is. Imagine it's like an insurance, okay? I'm covered from a risk and pay a price. I pay 2% a year to cover myself from a specific risk, like liability insurance for your car, okay? If that risk appears, for example a car crash, I receive an amount that covers the damage. Well, to cover from the interest rate increase risk, pension funds have signed derivatives with counterparties. When derivatives world is opened, leverage world also opens, financial leverage. And the margin call risk, the fact that you guarantee some assets, investments, treasuries for example, and you're potentially prone to what is called margin call. If the amount you guaranteed lowers in price, you must cover the shortage. So in short, what happened? The margin call arrived, pension funds had to cover the remaining amount. How? By selling treasuries to fund derivatives that allowed them to cover the taken risks, to grant the expected amount for defined benefit pension funds. Understood the sequence? That's why the stability of the state was a problem, because there's 3 trillions of these defined benefit pension funds around. So it's not just a part of the British wealth that can reach zero and nobody cares, it just happened. No, it's something that must be protected. So when there's a liquidity crisis, as the one we've seen in the previous weeks in England, the market can be left to auto-adjust, and the Bank of England must intervene in this case. And it's what it did by buying treasuries to say like, guys, price can reach zero because I'll buy anyway. So risk removed and our emergency? Well, kind of, because first of all, the storm hasn't calmed at all. But most of all, we understand now that we're against an unexplored territory in which there are monetary policies that are in conflict with policies carried on a month ago. And there are basically actions taken in emergency context. The impact that is also a lesson for everyone who says we should just print money and problem solved is that now markets are treating UK bonds in terms of spread like Greek and Italian market. Applause! In America, they say UK treasuries now suck so much that they look like the Italian and Greek. Just because of the low credibility these fiscal and monetary policies have that are in counter-tendency with each other. For all of you that the spread is not a problem, it's just a mechanism of the ECB, Guys, you understand it will be a problem for the UK now, because spread identifies the credibility on financial markets, and the English government credibility is significantly reduced by these actions. Liquidity of English treasuries, in fact, as we've seen, and for liquidity we say how many people there's on the other side buying treasuries when you want to sell them, this is liquidity. Well, as we can see, if it goes up, it worsens, liquidity worsens. Well, look at the peak UK had in yellow during last months. Clearly, Italian treasuries are the only worse than UK. If there wasn't ECB with its anti-spread shield buying, goodbye, farewell. But this problem is not in Germany, the blue line, because as there's still tension in the bond market, it stays a solid and stable state that will stimulate economy and stimulate families, for example, on the bills topic. But it remains a credible state, and most of all believed by financial markets. An ulterior impact is a possible downgrade by rating agencies, S&P, Standard & Poor's, then other than producing the US stock index S&P 500 is also a rating emitter. So solvency evaluations of public debt, well, it put English treasuries on outlook under negative observation. That could potentially reevaluate the rating from AA to a lower valuation. The funny thing of this story is that we're understanding what is happening outside of Europe when financial market credibility is missing. So the public debt is dumped and the expected return grows. The English are asking themselves the same questions that Italians daily ask when there is a spread growth. What do I do? Do I buy treasuries or do I sell them? In fact, Google reads, "Is it time to buy UK treasuries?" Nice question. But of course, return is recalibrating. Now the 10-year treasury returns 4%. Why? Because there's a higher perceived risk compared to other states. And we're understanding that if you move away from AAA, the safe treasury, because the country is financially stable, solid and bulletproof, it starts having higher returns to pay to fund your debt. And this way your public debt, when you go refund it, will cost always a little more. Now that these concepts are clear, a comment like this is total nonsense. Without printing money, we always ask money on interest. We've been paying interest since 1981. We paid more than our debt. Cursed liars, curse you, curse you! Curse you squared, we could say. Dear Pablo, I'm sorry, you don't know how these topics work. And this video should be an authentic lesson that we could have charged a fee on in our platform. But until these contents are prepared for me by the members of the team, I'm happy. I just take the time to record it and to explain them. So as an exception, we've put it on the channel regardless of its duration. Once edited, it could last even 30 minutes and not be YouTube content. But we don't care, we do it. And if you think they deserve it, leave a like. The message we must understand is that printing money is not enough. It would be too easy to print money and say, guys, all of my problems are solved. The thing is that money needs to be wanted by someone. I can't just make a new currency, Giorgio coin, and expect it to have a price recognized by the market because no one knows it. The topic of the currency is the credibility it has on the market, and when credibility is missing, the currency loses value. Is the problem just exclusive English? Can we just don't care, just head into a wall if we want? The answer is no, because it also has repercussions on global economy, because the US, if I'm correct, have the 3–4% of financial markets capitalization and a 2% of global gross domestic product. US encourages UK to dial back tax cut plan. And the sell-off in gilts reverberated. It had an effect across every financial market globally, and is perceived as a great menace, because English treasuries are also in the wallet of an Australian, to understand better. Is the Australian happy to see this volatility? Of course not. Britain's financial disaster is a warning to the world. A toxic mix of politics, inflation, and higher interest rates is threatening the financial system in the UK, sending a shockwave, a tsunami, through global markets, giving a strong warning to every government in the new economic era we're entering. And this is potentially one of the reasons why a bank well known in Europe, is considered potential failure risk. Which bank are we talking about? This video reaches 2,000 likes and we'll make a video about it, because we must understand the repercussions that these phenomena of a mainly financial nature have on the economic texture, and we'll do it in another video. At this point you can do two things as always. The first is downloading the slides and go read every insight I've talked about in this video, and you can do it for free by clicking the link you see up here. Or down here you can watch, if you haven't already, a video in which we examine why the Fed and the ECB are potentially making a mistake by rapidly increasing the interest rates. That's all for now. Thank you, subscribe, and we'll see you in another video. Bye bye.